The just concluded 14th session of the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development took keen interest on enabling investment within the boundaries of SDGs, especially in the developing economies. Wendo has more.
The 14th session of the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development held in Nairobi came at a significant time for the global economy, being the first major conference since the establishment of several historic agreements.
UNCTAD 14 is the first major United Nations conference since last year's landmark adoption of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, the Addis Ababa Action Agenda, and Paris Agreement on Climate Change. The 2030 Agenda will guide global collective action for sustainable development over the next 15 years. The 17 Sustainable Development Goals offer a blueprint for how the global economy, society, and environment should look in 2030.
The Addis Ababa Action Plan agenda underscores the importance of aligning private investments with sustainable development, along with public policies and regulatory frameworks. The agenda includes important policy commitments and key deliverables in critical areas for sustainable development, including infrastructure for energy, transport, water and sanitation, and other areas to help realize our sustainable development goals.
Under the Addis Ababa agenda, UNCTAD is mandated to mobilize financing for development. Launching this year's Development and Globalization Report, UNCTAD noted that developed countries have delayed the implementation of SDGs by failing to comply with the target to give 0.7% of their gross national income to developing countries.
We have actually also calculated, if I can call it, the accumulated debt from rich countries in terms of their failed fulfillment or the failed delivery on the promise of overseas development assistance, i.e. aid. And we have calculated that the cumulative shortfall since the establishment of the Millennium Development Goals in 2002 amounts to some $2 trillion today. This is, of course, money that would have made a massive difference for developing countries on their journey of eradicating poverty and to meet the Sustainable Development Goals. It is even more shocking considering that $2.5 trillion in annual investment is needed to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals in developing countries.
There is no developing country which has the resource capability, even with the best husbanding of limited fiscal resources, to finance the ambitious Agenda 2030 on its own, particularly the budget of infrastructure. And what we've been doing is saying the shortfall in Africa alone of $53 billion, a deficit in what governments, beyond what governments can afford. Most of it has to come from FDI, new smart partnerships, perhaps more engagement of sovereign funds, pension funds, according to how much we can reach out to our comfort zone for their landing.
UNCTAD's largest contribution to the transformational agenda is in partnerships and prosperity. However, during the World Leaders Forum, governments felt that this mandate was not being effectively implemented.
I think this is a great opportunity for us to say what are the real needs. Partner with national governments. Partner with our own domestic civil society. Help us eradicate disease. Help us eradicate hunger by empowering our people, not patronizing, but by empowering our people and partnering with our people. That has to be the solution.
Other challenges discussed were the knowledge gaps in South-to-South cooperation, which are critical for development.
We don't know much, frankly, about South-South cooperation. We know that it's growing. We know that it is playing a growing importance as a supplement to traditional North-South cooperation. But we do lack currently facts and figures in this regard. And these knowledge gaps and this uneven access to facts and figures on South-South cooperation is also a hindrance for the scaling up of for the meeting of the SDGs.
The gap in data for South-South cooperation will be filled. The thing is that the other institutions which will be rushing to try to do what we are trying to do have no historical track with a perspective from the South. So it's important that as we dialogue in Nairobi, we know that this is not something that will just go to lie dead. It's a scramble for a position where we think we're uniquely qualified as an institution because of our history of seeing from the perspective of the South to benchmark this work.
In line with the conference theme, From Decisions to Action, world leaders urge delegates to seek out practical solutions to tackle the real issues on the ground.
How do we translate the goals that we set ourselves of eradicating poverty, of saving our planet, of having greater equality? How do we translate those goals into actual objectives that meet the real demands, as Hage said, the real demands of our people? Because our people will not eat conferences. Our people want an end to poverty. Our people want shelter. Our people want food. Our young people want jobs. How do we practically tackle these objectives?